Well, hello there, Writers Tribe. Thanks for joining me this week. I thought we would do something a little bit different and talk about how to be a great podcast guest. How about that? Stay tuned. Okay, guys, here we go. So, over the years, I have done a lot of different media platforms. I've been a guest on several podcasts, on YouTube channels, on radio, and in print, all of the things. So, and each time it's been a really great learning experience of what to do and a lot of times what not to do. One of the hardest things is watching yourself back. And I can tell you firsthand, I find it so cringeworthy. Even now, after doing so many of these, I have the hardest time in the editing process because I really cannot stand to watch or listen to myself. And I know I'm not alone in that. So it's pretty typical to feel that way. But it's really important that you do watch them and you do listen and you give yourself a little bit of a critique, not criticism. Don't, beat yourself up, but give yourself a fair critique. Listen for things like, a lot. If you're a fidgeter, I'm a terrible, terrible fidgeter. My hands are always all over the place. So this has been like one of the challenges for me in doing this. You usually can't see it, but most of the time I will have like a pen in my hand or, something. Usually it's a pen. I usually have something in my hand and I'm very quietly scribbling as we're talking. And sometimes I get caught. Sometimes the pen sneaks up. But, do things that will make you feel comfortable, but at the same time, make sure that it's visually appealing. So we just jumped right in, didn't we? I couldn't even help myself. I jumped right in. So let me backpedal just a tiny bit so we could actually start at the beginning instead of in the middle. So here's the thing. When I started doing my podcasts, I just invited people. I just simply said, hey, I'd love to have you on the show. Let's do it on this date. And we schedule a date. Or people would reach out to me and ask to be on the show, whatever the case was. And it was pretty freewheeling. I'd say, okay, well, here's the link for Zoom, and I'll see you there. It'll be great. We'll have a great time. And what happened a lot of the time, almost all of the time, to be honest with you, my guests would come on and they would have, for example, if they were on their cell phone, they would have their cell phone set up to portrait mode, which is, I'll hold up my phone, which is like this. Okay, they have it in portrait mode. And when you're doing things on video, you want to have your phone set to landscape mode. So it's just the long way instead of tall, long instead of tall. And that is kind of important when you're doing a video podcast. So that's tip number one. If you're going to be working from your phone or your tablet, make sure it is in landscape mode and not portrait mode, okay? And that will help your podcast show host out tremendously when they are putting together the show. So now what I do is I send my podcast guests a checklist, if you will, kind of like a tip sheet of things that they might want to do for the best results for being on a video-based podcast. So I'm going to share all of those tips with you, and I will be reading some of them off. I hope you don't mind. Even if you do, I have to do it, guys. I don't have it memorized. So the first thing that I tell my guests is to make sure you're in a location where you have good internet connection. One of the most frustrating things when you're doing an interview is when the screen starts to freeze or the person cuts out or there's a delay, any of those things. Now, honestly, life happens. It's happened to me. Some things you can't avoid. Even if you normally have a great connection, something can go haywire and it can be faulty, and there's nothing you can do about it. But generally speaking, what you want to do is try and make sure that you have a good internet connection. And sometimes that means if you're working off a tablet or a laptop computer, you might want to shut down any background apps that are running. So if you have Windows open and a whole bunch of tabs open, you might want to shut those down because that will slow your connection a bit. Okay, so that's tip number, I don't know what tip number, we're going to call it number one because we backpedaled and we're kind of starting over. So tip number one is to have a good internet connection. The next suggestion I would make for you is to be in a quiet space. And again, I totally understand what it's like to be in a house with dogs. We have 4 in the house who like to bark at the most inopportune times. The doorbell might ring. If you have kids in the house, of course, they're going to want attention and all of those things. So to the best of your ability, try and be in a quiet place where you're not going to have so much ambient noise around you. And again, I know when I do interviews, I've had people's dogs jump into the interviews, and we've invited them on and we just rolled with it and said, bring that doggy on. Why not? Everybody loves to see dogs, right? So yes, this is not to make you nervous or anxious about any of those things possibly happening. It's life and it happens. For my show, I pre-record so we can edit out a lot of things. So it's not the biggest thing in the world, but it is helpful. So what I always tell my guests is that they should be prepared to be on camera. That means you will probably want to, if you're a female, I mean, if you're a guy too, I hate to just, put it towards one gender here, but you probably want to brush your hair. If you wear makeup, put on makeup, dress like you're going out to dinner or something. Dress like you're going to be on camera and thousands of people, if not more, are going to see you. And again, I don't want you to feel pressured. I don't want that to make you feel anxious. I just want you to be aware that lots of people are and can be viewing this. So you want to present as best you possibly can. So the next tip would be for shortly before you go live on camera. It's the silliest little thing, but it's really important. Wipe the lens of your webcam. Just take a soft cloth and wipe it off. You'll be amazed how much clearer your image is on the screen. And I'm guilty of failing to do that. And I've looked back on the videos and go, why does that look so cloudy? It's like the picture just looks grainy or something. And a lot of the time it's because I forgot to wipe off the lens. So that's always a great thing to do just before you go live, go on camera. Just wipe it off with a nice soft cloth and voila, it's a magical thing. Your light source. Oh my gosh, guys, let's talk about our light source. I've done so many interviews with people who have positioned themselves in front of their window. And I totally get why you would do that. It's probably a beautiful view outside, maybe of your yard, or if you have a lake or some pretty trees back there. I get it. I totally get it. However, unfortunately, it washes you out. So there's a huge glare behind you, and you are just kind of like this filmy cloud of a person. So your light source should be in front of you. My example is I'm going to play around with it on purpose for you guys. I have a ring light here that I use. It's just a small, I can't show it to you. I can't pull it down enough to show you, but it's like about that big. It's a small ring light. It clamps onto my desk and I position it. You kind of adjust it, move it around a little bit until it gives you just the right light that you want. It should be slightly above you coming down. You don't want it directly in your eyes because it's going to blind you. That's not fun. So a ring light is wonderful. It's no big deal if you don't have a ring light. Natural light is fantastic. Just turn so that window is facing you instead of behind you, and you'll get this really great natural light on you. And it works wonders, 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 wonders. I promise. I'm not tricking you. Let's see, what's the next thing I want you to do? The next thing I want you to do is when you are on camera, I want you to take a look, you're usually when you're talking, of course, you want to be looking into the little eye of your camera, and that will appear as though you're talking directly to the other person. But before you do that, I want you to take a look at your screen, take a look at yourself, which is what I'm doing right now. Take a look at yourself and look at your placement in the screen, in the borders of in the frame is the word I'm looking for, silly me. Look for where you're positioned in the frame. A lot of times I've interviewed people where they've been down here, really far down, and this is all you get from them. I've had ones who angled it up so high that I only have the top of their head and all of their ceiling, and all kinds of variations of that. So where you want to be in your frame is kind of dead center. I happen to have a bookcase to the left of me here, and sometimes I will position myself a little bit over so that you can see the bookcase. And sometimes I'll stay right in dead center and just kind of have it back there, because a lot of times, wrong hand, a lot of times I will put an image up here, a graphic right up in here. So that's why I kind of have this blank space back there. I will sometimes show my guest's book or their product or whatever it might be. We show it up here. So that's why I have my space set up the way that I do. But for you, that actually helps me. I can't speak for any other podcasters, but that actually helps me if you have a little bit of negative space behind you, because then I can put your book, a graphic of your book behind you there. But it's not crucial. Don't get over focused on that. That's just an added little thing. Let's see, what else do I want you to do? Oh, here's a big one. Turn that phone off, or at least turn it to silent. Lots of times, it's just like the movie theater. Somebody's phone always goes off, despite that warning at the beginning to please silence your phones. Same thing for the podcast. If you can, please silence your phone. I do keep mine visible, but I keep it silenced, and you might need to do that for whatever reason. Maybe your kid's school might need to call you or something, and you need to be aware of that, whatever the case is. I'm not saying you can't have your phone near you, just put it on silent. That's a good reminder. What I also tell my guests is that when we shoot, when we film, it's usually from like the torso up. You're only from here up. So I confess I am in sweatpants right now and slippers. I'm incredibly comfortable right now. But I've got my earrings on and my necklace, and I did my hair and all the things. So yeah, so you could dress from the waist down. I literally say in the tip sheet, you can dress however the heck you want from the waist down, but from the waist up, dress as if you are going to be on camera and lots of people are going to be watching you. Another thing you might want to do is have your book handy, or books if you have more than one, but have your book handy, or anything, whatever you might be discussing in your interview, have that handy if it's possible. And you can hold it up and show people. Although for my show, it's not necessary. You certainly can do it, but you don't need to, because I ask you prior to email me graphics of your books, covers of your books, and I will put the graphic up on the screen. So it's not that big of a deal for me, but generally speaking, any other shows that you go on, have your props handy and ready for you. Oftentimes, and my show is no exception, the host will ask you near the end of the interview to share with everyone your website, your social media platforms, and where they can find you if you're doing like an author meet and greet or anything like that, or doing any appearances or conventions. The host will ask you about them and ask you to share it with the viewers and listeners. So have those handy. It's okay if you have them written down and you need to read them off. No big deal. I've had to do that many times. And the biggest tip with that, anytime you have to do something that you feel kind of silly doing, like reading something instead of just being able to recite it, just own it. Just own it. Just say, I can't remember this, so I have to read it to you. Nobody's going to mind. It's totally fine. All right. The absolute most important tip that I can give you for being on a podcast or a television interview, whatever the case is, the best advice I can give you is to try and relax. Take some deep breaths before you go on. The best way to combat those jitters is to be prepared as best as possible. So you can ask the interviewer prior if they can send you an idea or a list or an idea of the questions they're going to ask. I'm always happy to do that. Some interviewers will say, well, I ask questions off the cuff. I don't really plan out my questions because I like spontaneity. For me, I like for my guests to be as comfortable as humanly possible. So if you need the questions in advance for me, or you have questions that you want me to ask, we work together to make it a really fun, great experience and casual and comfortable for you. Because the whole point for me, I don't speak for anybody else, but myself, for me, the most important thing is to have my guests feel really comfortable and at ease and have like a great conversational, fun, relaxed vibe. Because I think it makes for a great interview. And this is, obviously for you to promote yourself and promote your books or your work, whatever the case is. And it's my job to make it an environment for you where you can feel comfortable doing that, right? Absolutely. So yeah, those are my tips for doing a podcast with video interview. You can certainly use those tips for podcast or audio only, but more specifically, this one was about being on camera and the things that you can do to make it the best possible experience for you and your host and the viewers, of course. So I hope you found this helpful. If you have any tips that you can add for viewers, make sure you put them in the comments, because people really would love all the advice they can get in how to best promote their books and themselves as a brand or as an author. If you have any other topics that you'd like discussed on the show, feel free to send me an email or put it in the comments and we'll make an episode for you. Why not? We'll see you next time, guys. Take care.